What's up, guys? You are listening to HVAC Masters of the Hustle podcast. And this is your host, J-Dub Moneymaker. And welcome to episode 100, you guys. Woo! We hit the landmark of 100. I am super stoked, super excited. We got a huge amount of things happening for 2021 for HVAC Masters of the Hustle podcast, as well as the on-site and training programs that we have going on. And I say this every episode. I believe that everyone has a Spartan in them. It's my job, my duty, and my obligation to bring that out in you. And man, do I have a great guest for you guys. He's no stranger to the hot seat. I wanted to have him on episode 100 because he's a mentor of mine. He's a great friend of mine. And this guy has brought me to the next level in a huge amount. And he's always had my back. So let's welcome the one and only Weldon Long. How you doing, brother?
Make congratulations, 100 episodes.
100 episodes, man. Can you believe
it? That's crazy, man. And by the way, I believe that the student has become the teacher.
I don't know. Maybe. So Wally, you've been on, episode 15, episode 50, now episode 100. Can you believe
honored,
that,
my friend?
Absolutely, man. So my listeners that maybe don't know who you are, have never heard of Weldon Long, which I can't imagine that, but Weldon Long is a mentor of mine. He's been incarcerated in prison. He's grown a company to one of the biggest companies out there in 3 years and ended up selling it.
5 years.
5 years.
2003 to 2010 or 2004, 2010.
And I mean, you talk about a guy that could give any type of an excuse to go the other way, right? But his drive, his focus is on one path and one path only, Wally. So welcome to the podcast. I love seeing you. Last time I saw you was at your beautiful house in the beautiful Springs.
Yeah, my wife says make sure to give you congratulations also on the 100th episode. That's crazy, man. Talk about consistency. There's a book about that, or this side over here. A book about that. The power of consistency. You are the personification of that, my friend. Or consistency selling. Amen.
Or consistency selling, whatever. We got to stay consistent. That's the important part,
Yeah.
With this being episode 100, I really want my listeners to understand and focus on three things. And this is something that I talk about all the time. And, it's what drives us, right? What fuels our fire? What's our why? And what's our purpose, right? So Wally, you being a national sales trainer, the top guy, I would have to say, in the HVAC industry on top of the mountain, brother, did you see that this is where you were going to be when you started your first company? Because I know you talk about envisioning things, right?
Yeah. It's funny, if you have to go back to 1996 when I was in federal prison and my dad died and I started creating this vision for my life, I decided it was time to make a serious change. And I began to study, the power of purpose and the stuff you're going to talk about today, and, just visualization and just that whole thing, right? And I began to visualize what my life was going to look like. And I knew I was going to be a writer and a public speaker and an entrepreneur. I didn't know it was going to be the HVAC business, right? And I tell people I didn't choose the HVAC business so much as the HVAC business chose me. I was living in a shelter in 2003 after I got out of the joint. And after knocking on doors for 6 months, I got a job as a residential comfort advisor. I did great at it, did that for about a year or so, opened my own company, which you mentioned. I sold that in 2010. I wrote my first book, The Upside of Fear, in 2009. And that just kind of set off on a whole different direction. And spent the last 12 years or 14 years or so speaking and writing and consulting, training, as you mentioned. It's been a wild ride, man.
A wild ride, man. And, I'm fortunate enough to have the opportunity to, have you at my fingertips and, been able to have you as my mentor and ride along with me and really be in the hot seat with me on ride-alongs and things of that nature. I want to go over a quote real quick, before we dive into this. Oprah Winfrey says, "I believe there's a calling for all of us." I don't know, with the human being, there's a calling for all of us. I talk about our purpose and knowing our purpose, right? And that's one thing, me being a national sales trainer, right? I truly understand that this is my purpose, Wally, because when I go to these facilities and, you do the same thing, you get to see the growth of an individual, right? You get to see them and be a part of that growth to the next level. And when we are in this type of leadership role, right, the things that we learn about the people that we're training, because they really look at us as a leadership and they really break down their life stories to us, right?
Yeah.
So that's really my purpose. And what I understand is me being here, with all my learning disabilities and my struggles, as my listeners know, is I don't have any excuses, right? Wally, you have no excuses, right? We could have taken a path where we allowed the excuses to take control of us, right? But we don't allow that. What's your mindset on that, on knowing your purpose and your drive?
Well, I mean, before I comment on that, I just want to say you talk about, and I see some of the work that you're doing across the country, the interviews and the Facebook posts, and it's so much fun to watch. But I just got to tell you, was a year and a half, 2 years ago, I came to your house the first time, and we did the first episode that I did with you. I think what you said was episode 15. And when I met you, I'm like, this dude's fire. This dude's like I don't know what he's fixing to do. Maybe he's fixing to rob a bank, or maybe he's fixing to build a business, but something big was fixing to happen. I'm like, I was going to see you on the news or something, man. And I knew right away. And at the time I was consulting at the Bell Brothers. I'm like, we got to get this guy over there. You were another company at the time. You did that for a year or so. You blew it up. And then you launched this thing in there somewhere. And look at you now, man. I mean, you said specifically a year ago, like, I'm going to get into this training coaching thing. And then you just went for it, man. It's just been really fun to watch. So congratulations. I love your work. I love the energy. I love the enthusiasm you bring. As far as purpose, listen, man, if you don't know your why, you're never going to know your how. If you don't know your why, you're not going to know the what, right? You got to know what you want before you know what you got to do, right? It's like that old quote in Alice in Wonderland. Alice is all confused, and one of the characters in Alice in Wonderland, said, where are you? Or Alice asked him, like, which direction should I go? And the rabbit, or one of those characters, said, well, where are you going? Where do you want to be? She says, well, I don't know. And he says, well, it doesn't matter which direction you go. Right. And so direction is purpose, right? And that's what you're talking about. And clarity of purpose. I've got 2 books that sit here on my desk. Well, there's more than 2 here, but there's 2 that I refer to all the time. And one of them is a classic, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, written in 1937. And in the very first chapter of this book, I'll just read this to you because it's exactly what you're talking about. And by the way, this wasn't planned. Just before you turned on the recorder, I said, what are we talking about tonight? You said purpose. I'm like, this is crazy because I'm doing an event, some training right now for AbbVie Pharmaceutical, which is used to be known as Abbott Laboratories. It's a $33 billion drug company, right? And we've been talking about purpose with them. It's a whole program we're working on for them. But listen to this. Napoleon Hill says, thoughts are things, and powerful things at that, when they are mixed with definite purpose, right? When they're mixed with definite purpose, thoughts are powerful, which means they're not necessarily powerful in the abstract. They're powerful when they're set on a definite purpose. And another quick quote, which is, and I know you've seen this book in my hands before because I use it all the time in my training. Mind is the master, right? Mind is the master of the hustle, right? And the power of purpose is one of James Allen's essays that were written about almost 100 years ago. Dispersion is weakness. Concentration is power. Purpose is highly concentrated thought. All the mental energies are directed to the attainment of the object, and the obstacles which intervene between the thinker and the object are one after the other broken down and overcome. Purpose is the keystone in the temple of achievement. So it's funny that you just happened to mention that's what your topic was tonight, because listen, in the absence of purpose, it doesn't matter which direction you go, right? You could be aimless. It could be a ship at sea without a rudder. You got to have that purpose. You got to have clarity. In my book, The Power of Consistency, I call it focus, right? You got to have focus. You got to know exactly what you're going to do. You have to have clarity about what you're going to do. Then you can figure out what you got to do. But if you don't know where you're going, obviously you don't know what to do.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing about it is for my listeners that know me and I talk about my learning disabilities, there's a quote from Albert Einstein, And it's not that I'm smart, right? It's just that I stay with the problem longer, right? I don't give up, right? When life throws me an obstacle, Wally, it's not that, I take a step back of that obstacle, right? And observe it. I move to the side and then I move forward, right? So in my life, I've been told that, learning disabilities, I wouldn't be able to amount to anything. And every single year, my story, but every single year, we'd have these teacher conference meetings and I would talk about, hey, what do you want to do? My teachers would ask me, I want to make honor roll. I see all my friends doing it. That's something that I really want to do. And I would set my expectations up here, right? And the teacher would take the rug and just rip it from underneath me and always set my expectations low, right? But when you guys have a clear mind of what you want to achieve, where you guys want to go, that's my driving force right there, right? Yeah. My drive is people telling me, you can't get to this level, Jason, as I'm sure many people told you, Wally.
Sure. I've had my IQ tested 3 times. I went to the penitentiary 3 times. Every time you go there, they give you a battery of tests, and one of those an IQ test. And I always scored around 103, 104, which is slightly below average. And I tell people, that my success is from focus and persistence, just like you're saying. Like, I just don't give up on the problem, right? I'm going to keep hammering away until I figure it out. And what you just said about people telling you can't do it, there's a quote. I don't even know who said it, but I use it all the time in my speaking. Like, don't let people tell you can't do it while you're busy doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're busy. They're telling you, oh, you can't do it, Jason. Well, I'm kind of doing it, right? But that's just the way it is. Listen, one of the things we all know, when you get your purpose, you get your why, you get the what, you get the how, and you start doing it, you can't expect a ticker tape parade, man. There's going to be a lot of people threatened by your success, and I'm sure you've seen it.
Oh,
Jason, yeah. I mean, you've come up so much in the last year or two, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that you might even be surprised, like, damn, he's pissed at me now, right? It kind of shocked you, right?
It's kind of funny because I actually read, and I know you're not supposed to read into this stuff on social media, but you talk about kind of disturbing the training world, right? When it comes to our industry, I was called or told that I was a Grant Cardone wannabe. First off, if you're comparing me to Uncle G, Grant Cardone, I'll take that as a compliment. Because that is probably one of the biggest, hardest grinders that I've ever had the experience to meet, right? And also a mentor of mine as well. So just because I walk around with the 10X bag, right? That's a mindset. That's something that I have to keep in front of me daily. So call me your Uncle G trainer, call me whatever you want. But it's a compliment at the end of the day, just like you said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, and the more successful you become, the bigger target you become, the more slings and arrows you're going to catch. It's a sign of your success, right? Oh, yeah. It's not a sign of anything else except that you're kicking ass and taking names. So, I would thank the person that said that. I remember people telling me the same thing. I remember probably 15 years ago, I was doing a big event for one of the major manufacturers out in the Midwest. And I heard, and I was walking by a group of guys, and they said the exact same thing. I won't say who the comparison was to, but he said, oh, another so-and-so wannabe. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, this guy does that. I said, well, there's a lot of folks on the same path, it's all good by me. But it's been amazing to me that the people, this is the crazy thing, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well. The critics are the least successful people you know. The most successful people you know are very supportive. Stephen Covey endorsed both my first 2 books. His son, Stephen and Mark Covey, wrote the foreword to that book, Consistency Selling. They've never asked for anything in return. Tom Hopkins wrote the foreword to Power of Consistency. Tony Robbins endorsed my first book. The people who are at the highest levels are the ones that are supporting, encouraging you.
Yep.
It's always the ne'er-do-wells and the wannabes that are throwing the sticks and the stones. And this goes for everybody in your audience, right? You don't have to be a public figure to experience this. You just go out there and say, you know what? I'm doing this the right way. I'm going to create a ton of wealth in this industry. I'm going to be the best service tech. I'm going to be the best comfort advisor. Doesn't matter what it is. And watch what happens to the other people on the team. All of a sudden, you're cutting corners. Oh, he gets all the great leads, right? He rips people off. They'll make up every excuse. Why? Because if they just say you're awesome, if they just say you're a hard-working person and you're just getting shit done, then that puts the responsibility on them to do the same. But if they can write you off as a fraud, if they can write you off as a cheat, if they can write you off as a dirtbag, then they feel proud.
Mhm.
I'm not like him. You damn
Oh,
straight
yeah.
you're not like him, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Wally. Absolutely.
These people kill me, dude. I
I,
mean, I'm an old man now. And listen, you're the young gun. You're coming up. I'm an old guy now. I'm like I'm just not, I don't work as much as I used to. And I'm more about I got in the RV life a couple of years ago. The RV is like my safe place, right? That's like my safe place. I love it, man. And but I mean, just what you're doing is so awesome. And I'm glad that you understand that the slings and arrows, they're a reflection of your success, man. It
Mhm.
just tells you doing the right thing.
Absolutely, man. Well, I appreciate that coming from you. I got to ask you, you came from a lifestyle of being incarcerated, right? And being
Mhm.
able to work with influencers like, Stephen Covey, Tom Hopkins, your Tony Robbins, right? How did you get involved with working with people like that? I
Yeah.
mean, how did you put yourself out there? Because that takes a
Yeah.
lot for someone to, hey, let's reach out to Tony Robbins or have someone endorse my book.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I'll tell you the first thing I'll say about that is, Stephen Covey, the first book I ever picked up on my journey was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. And in that book, he talks about your circle of influence versus your circle of concern. And the circle of concern is everything you're worried about in your life, right? It's a great big circle. All this, it could be global warming, could be your family, all the things you're concerned about, right? And within that circle of concern is a tiny circle called your circle of influence. The circle of influence is all the things that you can control, which typically tends to be yourself, your thoughts, your behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you focus on your circle of influence, the things you can control, then very gradually that circle of influence grows. If you focus more on your circle of concern, in other words, complaining about things over which you have no control, your influence shrinks. So I read that and I took it to heart. And it's the funniest thing, Jason, when I read that in 1996, I was sitting in a prison cell and my circle of influence was so small it could fit in the head of a pin. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
decide when the lights came on and off in my cell. I didn't decide when I ate lunch, dinner, or breakfast. I didn't decide when I went to the yard. I had forsaken all the rights to the state and the federal government because of the decisions I made. But I became convinced I'm going to focus on me. So I started to focus on my thinking. What I was doing every day, was I studying, was I learning, was I trying to better myself? And gradually, the circle of influence has grown. And now every time something happens, I'm like, there it goes again, right? The power of consistency, we released that in Israel. The upside of fear has been released in Korea. And I'm like, man, there goes that circle of influence. And as that circle of influence starts to broaden, then people take notice. I'll tell you exactly how I ran into Tony Robbins. It was just fortuitous. It was back in 2009. Twitter was just coming up, and I joined up. And of course, I went to follow some people I admired, Tom Hopkins, Tony Robbins. And Tony had like 100 followers and was following like 3 people or something. And so I just like asked to connect with him, and we became, we connected there, right? And of course, now he's got millions of followers, but to this day, he only follows like maybe 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to be one of them because I got in there early, and so we started having a conversation. And somewhere along the way, he must have Googled something or read something, but it was an event I had done for a group of women prisoners here in Colorado. And he sent me that Twitter. He said, congratulations on your turnaround from prison to contribution. I'm like, man, that's the most awesome thing in the world. I appreciate that. Yeah. Then like a day later, I'm like, hey, can I use that for an endorsement on my book? And he goes, yeah, but thanks for asking, but sure. So that's on the book, right? Congratulations on your turnaround from prison to contribution. I met Dr. Covey. I got a chance to work with him. Tom Hopkins, one of his promoters, happened to meet me at a speaking event. He goes, hey, would you like to speak with Tom Hopkins and travel with him? We toured together for 4 or 5 years, Tom and I. He's still a very close friend to this day. So my point is that I just focus on my circle of influence, what I can do. And all those things happen organically, man. You can't make those things happen. They just happen. They just happen. It's the power of the subconscious mind. It's the power of hard work, the power of purpose, man. Exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And another thing that I talk about is my why, right? Or people's why, understanding your why. My why is my son, right? My son, as you know, we adopted. He's 4 years old. He'll be 5 next month. But I got to ask you a question, Wally. You being one of my mentors and everything like this, with you coming out of prison, right? You didn't really have a relationship with your son while you were incarcerated, right? Now, going into being a national sales trainer, where you're going to be on the road or on the road a lot, so you're going to be away from your kids, right? So my son being my why, my hardest thing is leaving. I'm on the road 3 to 4 weeks a month, you guys. So that's a sacrifice that you have to do, right? And it's something that you have to do to get to the next level. So my question to you is, being incarcerated, then going to training events and being on the road as many, million miles that you've done, how did you really cope with that? Because that's been my hardest thing is, when I leave, it's like, it hits me, man. And that could be, again, my father not being in my life, but again, your father passed away when you were in prison. So I just had to ask that question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those be careful what you wish for things. Totally. My greatest dream in life was to be a New York Times bestselling author. And The Power of Consistency hit number 5 when it came out. And be careful what you wish for, because what that really meant, I was going to be on the road and live my life on airplanes and hotels and conference rooms, right? Training rooms. So here's what I can tell you, man. I'm a big believer. They're a little bit counterintuitive, I guess. Number one, I'm a big believer in the philosophy that you got to do what you have to do now so you can do what you want to do later.
Absolutely.
Right. On the other hand, life balance. I will tell you that from 2004 through 2010, I was building my HVAC company. I sold that in 2010. I actually started traveling quite a bit in about 2008, but it really didn't pick up until 2010. And my son went to college in 2011. So the last 10 years, he was grown, he was gone. But then I got remarried 8 years ago, and it became really important to me. And it's been tough.
Mhm.
I remember one time being on a plane's getting ready to take off. All of a sudden, the captain comes out and kneels down in the aisle next to me. And he said, "Mr. Long, I just want to congratulate you and thank you for your business here on United." And he gave me this little card. He goes, "Welcome to the Million Miler Club." And I looked at him. I said, Captain, I said, I know you mean the best, but all that means is that I'm never home. I'm not home enough. And he goes, "Well, okay. Okay. Whatever." He goes, "Well, at least I'm going to buy you a drink." I said, "Captain, I'm in first class." Right? we don't have to worry about that. So, there's a catch-22, Jason, but you're right. You got to build it, right? I told you we're in the middle of a big event for this pharmaceutical company, the largest mortgage insurance in the company in the country. We just concluded 4 weeks of training with them. I've got another with a big publisher out on the East Coast, and we're working with their sales team. And I'm doing it all digitally. But it's because, once you establish yourself, and you've done such a great job of that in like record time, by the way,
Thank you.
you're a legitimate big time expert. And I want to say just a year, because the skills you developed took years to develop. But the way you've leveraged that in such a quick amount of time, such a short amount of time, has been really, really amazing. Much faster than I ever did. That's for sure. But as you make the sacrifice, you have some success. It's true for everybody in your audience too. You might have to run that extra leads. You might run 700 leads a year to build your wealth for 10 years. Uh-huh. And then you cut back to 300 leads a year. Yep. So it's a matter of paying our dues. It's true for everybody in every industry. Do what you got to do today so you can do what you want to do tomorrow.
Well, what do you think it takes to be a great trainer?
That's a great one. So number one, you got to have the skills to pay the bills, right? There's an old saying, Jason, I'm sure you've heard it. Those who can do, and those who cannot teach. Well, that's basically, true, right? So you got to show that you can do it. I've been with you at the kitchen table, and you're a freaking stud, right? So number one is the real expertise. There's a lot of guys, and not just in our industry, but in a lot of different industries, they do a little something, they jump out, I'm the expert. And they really don't have the chops, right? You got to build the chops first. You got to build the experience.
Well, and right? That's also what I feel that separates me from everyone else that trains in our industry, right? Is no one really, there's trainers that will sit in front of the classroom and train and just do classroom training, right? I'm a person that if I'm going to be at your facility, why am I not going to go in the trenches with you guys?
Right.
Why am I not going to show with what I follow my process, and my process works. If you follow A, B, C, D, E, right down the line, right, and you're consistent, like you say, then there's no reason why you shouldn't experience, wealth, but you have to stay consistent.
I remember one time you and I had a conversation. It was at some fast food, like a McDonald's or someplace, and we met after a call. And we were just chit-chatting for a little bit. We were standing by your truck. and we were chit chatting, and you asked me a similar question. You're like, what is it? What is it that makes the great speaker? And I don't know if you remember this, but I told you, tell a story, and then tell me the point of the story, and then tell me another story, and tell me the point of that story. Right? People who can communicate in stories. Listen, it's how we've communicated as humans, for eons, right? Because before we had the written word, how did we communicate? We told stories. We passed stories from generation to generation. That's how we had a history, right? And so eventually we learned how to write and all that stuff and start documenting that stuff. But for generations upon generations, eons upon eons, we were storytellers. And the great storytellers are always very, very successful in the speaking world. The training world, it's all about the expertise, about having the chops. And let's face it, you've cut your teeth and you got the chops.
Well, thank you on that, Wally. I got to ask you being a trainer for as long as you've been, what's the most rewarding outcome of being a trainer for you personally?
Yeah. And I think you've probably already experienced this, right? It's things like this conversation that you meet a young guy like yourself that's got all the right stuff. Probably the only thing I've ever contributed to your success is confidence. Like, dude, you're the real deal, right? Like, you knew everything else. I think you even had a lot of the confidence. I think it's just about having some other people come along and say, dude, you really got it, right?
Yeah.
So the most satisfying thing is when you breathe confidence into somebody and then you turn around and next thing you know, they've got 100 episodes of other podcasts and they're building a training company and they're doing this and they're doing that. On the HVAC side, on the training side specifically, like, how many times have you gotten a text message or a call from somebody? I got one just the other night. This guy who came to an event I did like 6-7 years ago. I had no idea who he was. And he sent me a message through Facebook. He goes, could we chat? So, and I always try to respond to that stuff. And he sent me a picture of this beautiful Corvette he just bought. And he's like, man, it changed my life. Let me tell you another thing. I just sold a training deal to this publisher out on the East Coast. And we're having a conversation a couple of days ago. And I asked the lady, I said, how did you come across me? She goes, oh, you were doing an event in Boston right after the Boston bombing in, I guess, 2011, 2012. And she said, what you taught me that day changed my life. It's never been the same since. And I've just thought for the last 10 years, one of these days, I'm going to be in a position and I'm going to hire Weldon Long, right? So it's just seeing people change their lives and have the success, whether it's a car, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a house. It's just seeing people have that success, that's just the cool part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, the most rewarding feeling is, like you said, when someone reaches out to you,
Sure.
Me being able to put my content out there, people reaching out daily, weekly. I mean, turning on your computer every morning, you have, 20, 30 emails about people just telling you how they love your content, how it's helping them. So I absolutely love that. So keep that stuff coming, you guys. Wally, I got to ask you, with your life that you lived, I mean, you've lived ups and downs and had to go through barriers and walls and everything. Do you regret anything, or would you change any of your past?
I've got 2 regrets in my life, Jason, only 2. Going to prison is not one of them, right? That was the path I had to travel. And I remember being, when I was in prison, I read a book one time called Man's Search for Meaning, written by Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl said, when you understand that all your suffering serves a purpose, that there's significance in your suffering, it's going to mean something down the road, then it makes the suffering a lot easier. And I became convinced many, many years ago in the penitentiary that my suffering was going to have significance. It turned out to be a speaking and writing career, right? So I don't have any regrets about prison per se. I do have 2 regrets in my life. Number one is that my father died and I was unable to say goodbye, that I was unable to have a conversation with him. My mother just passed away a couple of weeks ago, and I had the time to go to the hospital and be there. And, she wasn't, she was unconscious. She had had a fall and hit her head, but I was able just to sit there and talk to her privately and, tell her that I loved her and tell her I appreciated everything she'd done for me over 50 some odd years and what a great mother she had been to me and how much we were going to miss her and love her. And it was closure, man. I never got that with my dad. In fact, to this day, I've never been to my father's grave. I've never been able to bring myself to go there. There's just so much shame about the way I was living my life when he died that I couldn't even be there. The other regret is that I was in prison when my son from the time he was 3 to the time he was 10.
Mm-hmm.
And he experienced a lot of really bad things. His mother was a heroin addict. He was sexually abused by a family member. Another family member introduced him to drugs and alcohol and pornography at 6 and 7 years old. And so he had a lot of trauma, that kid. And when I got him at 10, and it took years to get him, he's 28 now and he's doing great. You know, in fact, he works for me in one of my companies. He's doing great.
Nice.
But those are the two regrets, that I wasn't there to protect my son, and I wasn't there when my father passed. Everything else that's happened in my life, from divorce to financial difficulties to prison, all of it, as Napoleon Hill says, was grist for the mill.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was the grind.
That was the grind. Absolutely.
And I saw your post of the day, rise and grind.
Rise and grind,
like,
baby. Absolutely,
man.
Just wake up, go to my social media. I'll have something positive for you guys to get your mindset.
You always have something positive to say.
You know, let's go ahead and end this. I want to end this with the Eric Thomas quote. And it's something that I talk about when I'm in training is, when you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, then you'll be successful. Right. And that is a super, super powerful quote right there. Because if you could imagine being dunked underwater, right, you're going to struggle and you're going to fight for anything for air. Right. And when you guys have that mindset that as bad as you want to breathe should be as bad as you want to succeed, your life will change. I promise you guys. Wally, what would you like for them to get out of this episode of HVAC Masters of the Hustle, sir?
You know, I think what I would like them to take away is exactly what you kind of opened with, and that's the power of purpose. You have to understand what motivates you, right? You mentioned the Eric Thomas quote about wanting to succeed as much as you want to live. You know, I believe that you have to have focus and purpose and figure out what those things are. And then those things have to become another strand of your DNA. That's how bad you got to want it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what I would just like to leave your audience with, J-Dub Moneymaker, is that it is about the power of focus, the power of purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Purpose is the foundation of all success, all achievement.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you for being a guest in the hot seat, episode 100, baby. Like I said, Wally,
congratulations, my friend.
First time you were on this podcast was 2 years ago, man.
That's crazy, man.
Right?
Dude, congratulations to you. And I'm just so excited for all the stuff you're doing. I love watching it. Your clients are fortunate. Your wife, your kid. I mean, you're just like a powerhouse, dude. You're just like a force of mother freaking nature, man. I love it.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
I need your energy.